Hi everyone, thanks for hopping on. I am going to be telling the story of how I completely ruined my ankle and overcoming it. So here's what happened. About a year ago, July 31st, I was in Montreal and I misstepped. That's the easiest way to put it. It sounds like such a foolish injury, but I wasn't the first one it happened to. There was two other people earlier that week that had the same exact thing happen. So it wasn't just me, but it became a challenge. I had to learn very quickly how to navigate a different country's healthcare system because I was not in the United States when this happened, and I was in a hospital up in Canada, in Montreal, French-speaking Canada, and they spoke pretty good English, but definitely there was a language barrier, and had to find out what exactly happened with my ankle. So when I was in the hospital, they initially said that it was dislocated and fractured. So the dislocated part they were able to put back, but they said, there's a fracture, you are going to need surgery. Do you do surgery in the United States or in Canada? So I decided to get surgery done in the United States and had to come home. That was an adventure, trying to get through the airport, not being able to walk, had to get a wheelchair to pretty much take me onto the flight. And then there was issues about, can you travel with essentially a broken ankle, because there's a risk of blood clots. So it was a short enough flight that they let me come home and do it. And when I got home, we discovered that, the dislocated part was put back. However, I had breaks on 3 different sides of my ankle, and that's what a trimalleolar fracture is. And all the bones were intact, but nothing was where it was supposed to be. So they needed to go in and put everything back to where it should be. And that was not as it was. I don't know what I thought. I mean, I've heard of people breaking their ankles before, and I knew, yeah, you're in a cast, but I never realized, hey, this is such a huge injury that it's going to be a life-changing injury. So I had that surgery done in August. And as you get any questions, let me know. I know on Instagram, people left me questions as well that I'll answer to. But I got the surgery done in August. And then the next week later, I ended up falling during my recovery. And I ended up fracturing the ankle that had just been fixed for a break. And so now not only could I not walk, but I had done more injuries to a really bad ankle. So that was in August, and I wasn't allowed to walk, get out of bed or anything till October. And then October, I got in a walking boot, and I was like, this is great. I'm going to be able to walk again. Not realizing my body had, in those couple months, forgotten what a walking motion was like. Still wasn't stable enough for me to put weight on my right foot. So it was 3 weeks after I got in the walking boot that I was able to stand up again. And then trying to learn how to walk. And in the meantime, I had this goal, as my picture is, of the London Marathon. I had signed up for the London Marathon and paid a lot of money to do a tour group for the London Marathon. And suddenly I was physically, really struggling with how I was going to do that. But as the medal shows, I did end up finishing that marathon. And over those couple months, it was just learning how to walk again, how to take one step after another. I could maybe, I learned how to take one step, and it took me longer than was expected, just because the nature of the injury was so bad. But as I was taking more and more steps, I could learn how to get to a step, and then didn't know what to do with it. I wasn't able to go home for several months because my ankle was in such bad shape, and I still couldn't figure out how to do it. So the injury was July, surgery August, learning how to stand again in October. It wasn't until January I felt like I actually could take one step after another and actually walk in some definition of the word. And I'm crazy because I was signed up for the London Marathon, and actually I am signed up for the Chicago Marathon as well. And so I had these goals in mind, and I was like, how am I going to learn how to walk again and hit my lifetime dreams of finishing some marathons? And so what ended up happening was I I decided to sign up for a 5K in January, 2 months after I learned how to stand up again, and just as I was still learning that step-by-step motion. And it it was a very ugly 5K. I was the last one to come in by quite a lot of time, and there was actually a half marathon going on the same exact course, and the half marathoners were finishing within minutes of me finishing as well. So it was a very slow event, and I saw that I, didn't have the strength that I used to have, but I still was going to learn how to overcome all this. And so every weekend, going out, trying to do more 5Ks, doing 5 days a week of just trying to get that training motion. And the one thing I never realized with this injury was, because I broke the ankle on 3 different sides, I lost stability. And so it wasn't just like, how do I stand up, but it's how do I stand up, take that step, how do I go down hills or inclines or anything like that. And I was trying to learn how to do it all from the beginning. So 5 days a week I was going out and trying to learn how to go up and down a hill, and I was trying to learn how to get my body to bend enough, because there's no marathons that are straightforward. And if you ever look up the London Marathon course, you'll see that it's definitely got a lot of bends and curves, and something I didn't expect was also inclines, declines. I thought it was a very flat course till I got there, and that's why when I did walk the London Marathon, it took me over 10 hours. I was one of the final, I think it was like 50 finishers. There was still a chunk of people behind me. I might have even been closer to the end, but it was brutal, because learning how to walk again, I became a marathoner again, but it was a very brutal journey. And even now, I'm over a year past the injury, and next week is going to mark a year since I had surgery to repair my ankle. But still, when I stand up, I don't walk steady. I struggle a lot with just like, how to get that 1 foot ankle motion moving. And once I'm up, if I've been walking for like 4 miles, 5 miles, I can keep on going. But it's getting those first couple miles done, which my body just has had to relearn how to take each step. And it's still a very ugly walk for 30 seconds to a minute just once I start to stand up. But I have been able to relearn how to walk again. I have tackled a marathon, and that medal is something I greatly cherish, because I know all the work that went into it. But it definitely was a much larger of an injury than I ever thought that these types of injuries were. So I put on my Instagram that I was going to be doing this Q&A, and I'm going to hop into some questions. But if you have any questions in the chat, I've got the chat open. Please let me know as well, because I definitely want to answer your questions. I had never heard of a trimalleolar or of injury before I had one. Never went through the process of having to learn how to stand up again. It was all a new experience to me, so I'm very happy to share any of my experience, answer your questions, and explain just what it's like to overcome this. So I know the first question was, what exactly caused the injury? And that was, I just misstepped off of a curb. It's such a basic little thing, but the way that the curb was set up, I wasn't the first one that happened to. I was the 3rd person that week that fell on that same exact curb. And I think what happened was a couple months before, like back, what was it, like 2 months before, I woke up one morning and tried to get out of bed, and just my ankle felt off. And I think that was, I think I fractured it at that point. The x-rays weren't able to really show anything, but when I did the second injury here, or actually the 3rd injury, which was the fall after this surgery, they saw that there was another fracture in there that got reopened essentially. So I think that my ankle is weak, and I was the 3rd person that week to fall off of this curb, and unfortunately my injury was extremely serious. Next question was, what does it mean, like broken on 3 sides with the trimalleolar injury? So I actually broke bones on both sides of my ankle and also the back. So I actually have 3 different scars, because they had to, in doing the operation, they had to fix my ankle on all 3 sides. So they had to actually like turn my body around so that they could do the left side, the right side, and then turn me over to work on the back side of my ankle. So normally, like with an ankle break, you're breaking a ankle bone on one side, but because I broke 3, and in particular that backbone, that is where a lot of the difficulty comes with learning how to stand up and walk again, because you lose your entire sense of stability with all 3 of those breaks happening at the same time. The next question I had was, did I need an emergency surgery or was it delayed? So it was delayed. And in talking with them, we were trying to figure out, do I do surgery in the United States or Canada? I'm an American citizen, and I was very foolish on this trip and did not have travel insurance. And but even if I did, it sounded like they weren't going to accept the travel insurance for this. Looking back, I might have done the surgery in Canada because I was quoted it was going to cost around $6,000. And in the United States, even though I had travel insurance, the bills definitely came out closer to around 15 to 18,000 out of pocket to pay for the same exact surgery. So it was a tough decision trying to figure out where to do it, but it wasn't critical. And the reality was I just wanted to be at home. I was in a different country. I had just arrived there on vacation just the day before, and I was literally headed outside of my hotel to see my first tourist attraction when the injury happened. So I was like, I just want to get home. And so I did the surgery back here about 2 weeks after the injury. How long was I off my feet completely? I was off my feet from the injury, July 31st, till October 22nd was the first time that I was able to stand back up in a walking boot. So it was quite a chunk of time. So I had moments of feeling hopeless during my recovery. Way too many moments. Like, I still had these crazy goals. I was going to do the London Marathon and I finished it. But basic stuff like, how is I going to get inside of a bank to get money? How is I going to go to a restaurant and just like meet up with friends? Like, there's very basic things that I just couldn't do, and I really couldn't leave my house either. And I actually wasn't even at my house. I had to go to a relative's house because my house had too many stairs, so I wasn't even home. And it definitely was a time of feeling very hopeless, but I still had these crazy ambitions. And even now, I know, okay, I can become a marathoner again after learning how to walk. But and I'm going to do that October Chicago Marathon coming up in, I think it's about 68 days or something. So I still have these crazy goals, but definitely it's sometimes just the everyday stuff of wanting to go out, knowing that even when I stand up today, standing up is still a challenge. Those first couple steps are still a challenge. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them. I'm just going over some of the questions that people dropped into my Instagram. Do I think I'll ever be able to walk again? Yes, I'm doing it now. It's not a pretty walk, especially those first couple steps, but after, like, normally I'd say about 30 seconds to a minute of walking, I'm back to walking as normal as you could tell. Like, you wouldn't notice that I had an injury, but those first couple moments of getting up, you could tell that there's something wrong with the way that I walk. Was there any major setbacks in my healing process? Yeah, so a week after surgery, I ended up slipping and falling, and I fractured the ankle that had just been repaired. And there was apparently a fracture in there, which I think goes back to like whatever happened in May. But this other injury was something new and unexpected that, it was already a bad injury, and then my slipping and falling and refracturing it just a week after, there was suddenly a lot more pain than I had before. So it was a bit more of a challenge trying to get back up and walking when it wasn't just a really bad ankle injury. Now it was a fracture on top of all that. How do I handle days when my body still doesn't cooperate? So luckily I haven't had one of those days since April, but I will say this: a week before I headed to the London Marathon, so that Saturday before, I did a 6-mile run, and by running I mean walking, because I can't run anymore. But so I did the walk, and that the next day my body it gave out on me. I tried to stand up, and it hurt a lot to put pressure back on my foot again. And this was months after the injury and 1 week away from the London Marathon. And I was trying to figure out how do I do this? So I actually had to go back to being on crutches. I was going to meet a hockey legend, Brian Trottier, who's a multi-Stanley Cup winner from the 80s. And I have a picture of me and him, and I'm using my crutches again. It was the only way that my body could stand up. And then after a few hours, it gets better. But I know even after the London Marathon, I had the same exact thing happen where I just pushed myself too much doing a marathon, walking for 26 miles. And for me, after my injury, that medal took me over 10 hours to earn, but I did it. But and I was okay after the race, walking to my hotel room, walking, like I could handle it. The next morning when I woke up, my body could no longer bend in that like straight position with the knee and the ankle. So I was back to not being able to walk again. I had to call down to the hotel like desk and say, I can't get out of bed. I have do you guys have a wheelchair or anything that I can use to get my ankle to remember to go under, like align up with my foot essentially, to get it to have this straight motion? And it took me about 9 hours of being in a wheelchair in my room, trying to walk with the wheelchair. First, like just sitting in the wheelchair and then holding on to it after that marathon for my body to then remember how to walk. So the next day, this picture is from me 2 days after the marathon. So the marathon was Sunday, and this was Tuesday's photos after I finally was able to stand up again after the marathon, going around town and getting all the pictures, because the marathon took me way until night, and I lost the marathon Monday, not being able to walk again. Just my body, if I strain it, it stops having that motion for me to be able to take one step at a time. Did the relationship with my body shift after the injury? Yeah, I became very frustrated with myself on very basic motions. Stuff that I always took for granted, being able to just stand up, being able to drive. It's very difficult when you go from being a very active person, and I was, had at the time of my injury, I was training for the New York City Marathon, and I was also supposed to do the Chicago Marathon, and I knew in the hospital bed, that picture of me, that all those plans went by the wayside. And so I was used to having kind of, I'm going to challenge my body to the fullest. And then, in one stupid step, I lost that ability and knew that 2 of those dreams were out of the question. So, doing the London Marathon it was a challenge for me mentally, because I had to figure out, can my body do this again? And I am very stubborn. So I thought my body could definitely do it. And I knew I knew once I got to mile 13 on the course, I was like, okay, this is happening. My body is back and I can do it. But then the next day, when I couldn't even stand up, and it's like, I just handled walking 26 miles. Why can't I even stand up? It's a very vicious cycle, and sometimes I still feel it. I can have a great day, like Saturday. I went out this past Saturday, and I was out for about 2 hours doing a training course, and then later in the day, just trying to put my foot down. My foot's so sensitive, and it's like, this is a new feeling that, I feel like at times I know my ankle and all the pains, and it's like, is this the same pain I've had, or is this a new ankle pain that I'm experiencing for the first time? So I'm going to keep going through the questions that I got on Instagram, but definitely feel free to drop any questions that you have about this injury as well, or, going from not walking to becoming a marathoner. I'm happy to share my story. Another question I have is, what's something that you couldn't do 6 months ago that I can do now? So 6 months ago, I was still in the process of learning how to stand up and walk for more than a half hour. And I was trying to also learn how to make bends when I was walking. Such a basic motion, but my body just couldn't figure out how to put enough weight on it to be able to turn right. So I was still working on that type of motion. Now I don't think as much when I'm making turns, especially if I'm doing a race. But I know, for example, checking out the Chicago Marathon course, I'm going to be looking out for a lot more of those bends, because that was something I had a lot of trouble with when I did that London Marathon course. Do I struggle with asking for help and relying on others? Yes, this was a huge one, especially when it came to trying to do a marathon. After the race, I reached out to the disability team, and trying to become a disabled athlete was something that when I entered into the marathon, I never thought that was going to be the classification I was trying to go under. And then I realized I needed a lot of help to finish the race, and there was a couple of support items that I was very vulnerable about, and I said, I need help with getting out to be on the course longer, and I also need help with if you have a para athlete that can be with me. And I reached out and they said, yes, we can help you with extra time on the course, but here's how you find out to have somebody supporting you on the course physically. And unfortunately, that organization was not very responsive. So I had to I tackled the marathon on my own, knowing that physically I didn't have the help that like my true vulnerable self knew I needed. Luckily, on the day of the marathon, there was, I call her my guardian angel. Her name was Belinda, and she was a volunteer for the London Marathon. And her job, along with her team, was they came out after the halfway point of the marathon and offered to help anyone that needed any extra assistance. And so Belinda stuck with me from the halfway point to the finish line, and basic items I needed help with. Like, we were moved to the curb because we were so far late in the race. But I just needed somebody that I could hold on to, like her hand or her backpack. And she just let me hold on to her to get through some of these physical obstacles, which are very basic. But for me, with my injury, was a big challenge trying to learn how to step onto a curb and step off of a curb, especially as it was getting darker. And there's still that little bit of a nervousness with me. I mean, my injury and it all came from misstepping off of a curb, and it was months of learning how to walk again. So it was a whole fear factor as well. And it was tough saying I needed the help. And unfortunately, London Marathon didn't give me that help, but an amazing volunteer did give me that help. So I was able to finish that race, but it was definitely tough emotionally going into it. Another question I got on Instagram, and if you've got any questions about, breaking your ankle in 3 places, learning how to walk again, drop them in the comments. I'm just going over questions that people asked in my Instagram on it. Let's see. Did this experience make me more empathetic towards others? Yes, I feel like I've always been very empathetic, but I definitely see the struggle now that people have trying to overcome an injury, getting out on a course. And I've always been in huge admiration of any of the disabled athletes, and especially now that I have joined those ranks, I'm just amazed at seeing what people are able to accomplish, and it's a very humbling experience for me. But I've always been like one of those people that just cheers on everyone, no matter what their goal is. So it made me more empathetic, but also I was already very empathetic, but I definitely understand just where they're coming from, and it amazes me seeing what people have accomplished with their bodies. Were there moments like I felt like giving up on my recovery? No. Learning to walk again, like, that was a non-debatable for me. I had to learn how to do it. I had to learn how to function again, and it has not been a pretty road. But then I look at pictures like, holding my London Marathon medal, and I'm like, I did actually overcome it. I'm still not great, but I'm walking a lot better, and I'm very confident with, the progress that I have made. But it was never an option of that I can't get better. I'm 41 years old. I was 40 when the injury happened, and I knew I just had to get the strength long term in my life to be able to start walking again and hitting those goals of being a marathoner again. Had I experienced anxiety in situations that remind me of the injury? So London Marathon was definitely one of those once I got rerouted onto the curbs, because it was a stupid misstep. So, being able to ask somebody for help, and like I said, I felt like my guardian angel, the volunteer that was with me at the London Marathon, being able to hold on to her, because I'm still scared stepping off of curbs. I know most people don't think about it, and before that I didn't think it was a possibility. And this one curb that I misstepped off of, that caused everything, it wasn't a traditional curb. I was the 3rd person that week to fall off of it and to injure myself. I just happened to have the worst injury of it, but there's still that little bit of a nervousness when I am stepping down off of a curb. Is my ankle going to misstep, giving out a little bit? But being able to sometimes ask a friend, hey, do you mind if I just hold on to your hand? Or definitely something like the London Marathon, having somebody who really just was there physically to help support me get to that finish line. I'm not afraid to ask for help, but I definitely feel that little bit of nervousness at times when I am walking. And so part of the stuff I'm experiencing when I'm doing this training now for the Chicago Marathon is I am trying to practice more of stepping on and off of curbs independently, because I figure I am going to be in the very back of the pack of that race. And if I do get rerouted onto the curbs or the sidewalk, I am going to have to do those curbs, and I am going to have to face my biggest mental block, which is, how do I step off the curb and not hurt myself again? Another question I had on the Instagram was, are there any specific tools or devices that really helped in my recovery? So my doctor had me wearing a night splint, which actually pulls your foot backwards, because that's where I'm missing the most degrees of motion, and what makes it hard for me to, made it hard to learn how to walk again, because my foot wasn't going fully flat, but also makes it hard for me to run, and why, I had to turn into a walking marathoner. But this splint, what it does is I put it on at night, and then as the night goes on, we, are able to like just pull it back further and further. So my ankle does get some more practice stretching in that way. And over the course of the night, I probably get an extra, I don't know, I would say probably another like 10 degrees of motion, which is huge. But I really need to get an extra like 3 to 4 on top of that to start to run again and lead a more traditional lifestyle than how I've been for the last over a year now at this point. Another question was, has my content changed because of this experience? So being a travel vlogger, injuring themselves while traveling, I did have to adjust some of my travels. I had some videos for, backup stuff, but now, I had to totally pivot my business and pivot everything I do. I quit my job 6 months before my injury to go into traveling full time and sharing travel experiences, making videos, sharing content. And when you're not able to get out of bed, you rely on what's on your phone. And then as you start to run out of that content, there's not much else available. So I had to just pivot the business a lot, but it gave me some opportunities to really examine my business more. And I'm excited now that I can travel into stuff, but I definitely hold back posting in case something comes up with life. I need some content in reserves. What's the next goal that I'm working towards? So it's the Chicago Marathon this upcoming October. I know that I can handle a marathon. The London Marathon was in April. My injury was, July, and I learned how to stand up again in October. So I'm definitely have a few extra months of recovery built in, but that is my definite goal. What I've got my eyes set on is finishing the Chicago Marathon and being able to see that I can do it. After that, I'm not sure what my goal is, but for right now, the goal is definitely reach that finish line in Chicago, hopefully in a faster time. My London time, I was definitely one of the slowest athletes out there. It took me about 10 hours and 20 minutes. My goal for Chicago is to finish around 8 hours, which I believe, based on my training, is possible. Also differences of the course, but it's something that I'm aiming towards. I really feel confidently that I can finish that marathon, and I would like to do it faster. Just the difficulty is I still can't run just the way that my body and my ankle are after my injury. Another question that I had is, what's the most meaningful comments or message you received during your recovery? And that one's a tough, because I don't know that I really did. I mean, I would say people that, supported my goals and knew that I was stubborn enough to chase after them, like the ones who still were counting down to the London Marathon, even when I, couldn't stand up. Those are definitely like those words of encouragement that kept me going. But for average encouragement, it really wasn't anything. So I would say, like, if you have somebody that's in your life that's trying to overcome a crazy injury like this, learning how to walk again, doing basic human function again, the type of words that I wish that I heard was just, what's your goal and how can I support you? Because I don't feel like I had enough people in my life that probably were saying something like that, and that would have been very helpful to me, just to know that my goals weren't crazy, or if they were crazy, that people were going to support me on that path. And then I've got time for like one more question. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm just answering questions that people sent on Instagram. But the last question I'm going to tackle otherwise is, what do you do when your body has flare-ups of pain now? So I actually have, really bad foot pain right now as I'm doing this. But normally I just have to push through it. I've decided, as I was laying in that hospital bed, that I was not going to let this injury change my life. It took many opportunities away from me, but I wasn't going to let it take away every opportunity going forward. So when I feel pain, it's probably not the right answer, but I go out and I tackle what my goal is. So I'm still have pain, and I was out doing Chicago Marathon training the last 2 days, and I'm just going to keep on pushing myself every single day. But it's I would have thought back a year ago when I injured myself that I would not be feeling any pain or discomfort a year after surgery. I didn't know how bad of an injury that I really had until, a year later. Or even I would say, like, once it was October and I realized, like, once I could technically start doing weight bearing and I couldn't stand up on my foot, and then when I was like, okay, I can start walking again, but I couldn't walk, that's when I realized that everything was a lot more difficult than I initially expected. But main thing about me is that I'm very stubborn. I'm going to keep on chasing my goals, sharing about travel, sharing about my life, because I love this, and I don't want to let ankle injury change my entire life. It changed a chunk of my life, but I don't want it to change everything. So I still have my crazy dreams and still going to share everything. So with that, I'm going to wrap up this live. But if there's more questions that you have, please feel free to put them in the comments. If you're watching a replay of this, feel free to put them in the comments. I'm an open book when it comes to sharing about this injury, because I want to be who I wish that I could have been or had as a resource when I first had this injury. So thank you so much for watching, and I'm going to be hopping on live probably like 2 to 3 times a week, sharing about different parts of my life or different places that I'm going. But this was a new experience for me, so I really appreciate you being here, and hope you have an amazing day. Bye.